All right, good evening. Happy Thursday, everyone, and welcome to another episode of BGSO Brown Girls Sound Off, where we center and amplify the voices of women of color. It is so lovely to see all of your beautiful faces. Hey, Carrie, hey.
Hey.
I know that's right. See, my cousin hits me back with a hey. All right. Hey, Edwina, Nafisa, and Chantal. Oh,
Hey.
listen,
Hello.
isn't Nafisa gorgeous with her tan, y'all, from
Oh, thank
vacation?
you.
I'm so jealous, but guess what? Next week, literally this time next week, I will also be tanning in the sun. But first of all, I cannot believe it is May 20th already. I mean, where the heck did the month go? We've enjoyed this month in a lot of ways, but this was also a rainy season for many folks, right? It is springtime, and we know that we need the rain and the sunshine to blossom and grow. But we're going to go ahead and continue our conversation about mental health. As we've been talking about, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And if you've been following our previous episodes, you know that no matter what we're talking about on BGSO, we're always going to be talking about our mental health and our identities and the way that our identities and experiences impact us, right? But this month, we are more intentionally focusing on our mental health. So let's go ahead and get to it. First of all, we are so lucky to have Carrie Holland-Lee back with us again. If you remember, Carrie joined us last month for our relationships series, and Carrie is a therapist. She practices on her own and is part of a group practice as well. And so, Carrie, could you please give us a really quick reminder about the work that you do?
Sure. So right now I work with a varying types of clients.
Uh oh.
Uh,
Carrie, would you repeat that? Your
couples,
connection
I
was a
have
little off.
individuals.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I was
oh,
just saying your connection was
you
a little
lost me
off. If you
again?
can repeat that.
Oh, okay. So I work with couples, individuals, mostly with a lot of different traumatic things going on. Um, and right now, I am also trying to um, work on doing a more regular podcast about mental health because it is very important. So that is something I'm also kind of fleshing out and working on as well.
Yes, and guess what? If anyone needed a reason why, because we cannot center and amplify our voices enough, right? Not just, those of us who are just going through life day to day, but especially when you think about practitioners, right? And service providers, there is still a shortage, right? And so we're grossly underrepresented in it. So I'm so proud of you, Carrie, and so happy
Yes.
that you will be creating a platform so that other Black and Brown women can hear from a therapist that looks like them. So thank you so much. Um, so I want to start off this conversation with Carrie, and I want you to be thinking about like culturally responsive mental health practices, right? So
Mhm.
from your perspective, how does being a Black woman, a Black therapist, a Black counselor, how does that influence your practice? How does that show up? And on the other side, how do your clients? So when you think about serving Black and Brown women, how do their identities also impact your practice?
Well, it definitely um, colors my approach in terms of working with um, clients who look like us, Black and Brown clients, because there are different issues. Just underneath the surface, there, is of course, racism and, just not being able to have access to certain things that other cultures do, as well as just within the dynamic, mental health is still not something that's promoted. And so really trying to first let people know that it's okay that you're here. We spend a lot of time just normalizing the fact that getting help is not foreign, that we're not meant to be in this world alone. And so therefore, if you need to talk to somebody, that doesn't make you any less of a person. And so in working with minorities, it is very, important to spend time doing that. Because that's a step that can be skipped over in terms of just acknowledging the elephant in the room that they're not comfortable. And so I think that is why a lot of people of color seek out another therapist that looks like them, because they can relate to that dynamic or that aspect. And so I feel like because of that, most of my clientele does happen to be African American. I have a handful of Caucasian people, a handful of, people of Asian descent. But mostly I would say a good 80% of the people that I see are African American, and African American women.
Well, thank you for serving our sisters. I mean, seriously, thank you so much for serving our community. I literally can't thank you enough. And you're right. When I thought about seeking out a counselor, I sought someone who looked like me too, right? And you're right. I think about my own experiences when I first walked in and I actually have a male counselor. When I first walked into his office, his home office, I was very, very nervous. And just like you just shared, I love the fact that he acknowledged that. You know what I mean? Because one thing that I can't stand, no matter where I'm going, whether I'm nervous about getting a vaccine, it doesn't matter what I'm nervous about. If I'm nervous about going to the dentist and having a dental procedure done, like to be like, oh girl, you have nothing to be afraid of, or that actually makes me more nervous. I'm like, okay, because now you're trying to convince me to stuff my feelings down. You're trying to convince me that what I'm not feeling is real and it's not valid, right? And so by saying that, okay, guess what? A lot of people are apprehensive about seeking help. A lot of people walk into my office and they're very scared to open up. And that's very, very normal, right? And so I think about the ways that actually has, let my guard down. And now I come plop on his, sofa, and I'm eating the Kit Kats in the jar, and I'm ready to, I'm about to fall asleep on that couch. So yeah, absolutely, I identify with what you shared. I have another quick question for you before I kind of pivot a little bit and ask the ladies something slightly different. But when you think about your practice, right, and when you were training to become a counselor, training to become a therapist, obviously it's different putting theory into practice. So how would you say like you've grown professionally, like once you started actually seeing that, as you put it, that 80%, people of color clientele base, like what do you feel changed from what you learned in the books, right, versus how it showed up in your office? And I can relate to that, just being an educator. What I learned in the books was different than when I showed up in classrooms especially in front of mainly Black and Brown children. So how do you think your practice has been shaped?
So I can say that unfortunately, there was maybe one class on ethics and cultural competency. That was it. You got one class, and they fit all the minorities into one class. And so I went into my practice trying to change what was already out there, because I knew that if I only had this one class, that means that my other Caucasian counterpart coworkers only had one class. And so not many people seek out to get further education. And so when I started out, my target population was the African American community. I had worked at DSS in the foster care unit, so I've seen what the lack of mental health does in the community. Then I worked, after I got my license, I worked with people who had substance abuse issues mostly. And so my goal was to be a representative, to say that, hey, like, you can do this and here's how I can support you. And so wanting to give a voice, wanting to give a shoulder to our community is what kind of colored how I approached my practice. And so I basically, I allowed my experience to speak for itself.
First of all, I love that. I know that's
Most of my clients are referrals.
Oh, that's
So I have a lot of people that was like a friend of a friend told me about this, or, I went to this program, or, different things like that. And so I have done little to no marketing actually of myself, which is why when you ask for a bio, I was like, I don't even have a bio. I don't write about myself. But so outside of a blurb on Psychology Today, there's really no other like marketing and things that I do, which to me is more important, because that means that whatever service I was providing was good enough for somebody to go tell their friend. And that means that they're talking about mental health. And that means that they have felt like their issue was normalized, which is important, because even beyond them working through their issue, that means that they can transfer that to other people.
Thank you. Thank you. So, ladies, I know that, none of us on here are therapists. Well, I don't know, unless y'all have some side gigs that you did not disclose. But I want to know, just like from your perspectives, I know many of us on this panel have actually sought at one point. I know I'm still in counseling, but, some of us have been in counseling or therapy. Like, how do you feel your identity has like shaped the way that you've shown up to a therapist's office, or kind of has shaped what was going through your mind? Like, what are some ways that your experiences and your identity, and your experiences based on your identity actually impacted, you reaching out, whether you were going to reach out for help, the people that you sought help from, or even like once you stepped in the office, how you showed up?
Well, I'm currently in therapy. I'm seeking a therapist, and I wasn't quite sure of her ethnicity when I sought therapy. I just knew that I needed to go, and at that point, it was like whoever the first person that is accepting patients, and that's kind of how I ended up with her. And when I noticed that she was Filipino, my therapist is Filipino, and that I know I wanted a woman. I know I did not want a Caucasian woman. I knew that. And so I was a little hesitant because I just, I don't know. I really was seeking more of an African-American woman that I felt could be more relatable, but her atmosphere was inviting. Her atmosphere was very comfortable. And that is something I definitely knew I needed in order to open up and continue to go and seek her. And now it's like, we've built a relationship where it's beyond what I wanted and more so of what I needed, seeking her and being able to talk with her. So,
Nice. No, I agree. I think back to when I was seeking a counselor. Initially, I wanted a Black woman. This Black man happened to come highly recommended, as Carrie was talking about that word of mouth, and came from a good girlfriend of mine that I really trusted, and she talked about how she felt going into his office and everything. And it was funny, like when I heard you share that now you all have built a relationship that has basically exceeded your expectations. I have something that needs to be fixed in my house, and my counselor actually reached out to someone, just because that was something that came up in counseling, and said, and actually sent a text to me and another person connecting us, like, hey, Tony needs this done, would you please look out for her? So that warmed my heart to know that even something as simple or small as something that I need done in my house, my counselor was looking out, like, hey, I have access to a resource that can help you with that.
Yeah.
So I know how important that is. Thank you. Nafisa, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, for me, currently I'm not in therapy. I do want to start again, but when I first sought out therapy, when I first moved to Baltimore, I was very young. I mean, at the time I didn't realize how young I was. I was only 23. And my therapist was a white woman. She was a Caucasian woman. And I could tell like she cared about me, but it was just always missing something. Like I would, like when I would go there and like when I would leave, I was like, shouldn't I like feel like better than I do? Like I was able to like talk through things, but I feel like I never really got that connection. And I honestly again, I could tell she cared about my well-being. Well, you know, as I went to her for a long time. I went to her for probably like 3 or 4 years. And I really think it turned me off from therapy because I was just like, I wasn't getting what I needed. And I think I was too young to realize that it was just because I wasn't identifying with her enough. And I don't think that I was being my true, authentic self in therapy because I found myself like not wanting to open up about every single thing because for some reason, I'm like, this is my therapist, but I was feeling like maybe she was going to judge me about certain things, or maybe she wouldn't fully understand because although I knew she wanted to help me, it's still a difference when it's someone who's walked in your shoes, you know, and has that experience as a Black woman. So for me, I know now as a 41-year-old Black woman that I definitely need to have a person of color. I feel like I want a woman, but you know, I'm going to just, you know, pray on it and see where God lands me. But I know I definitely do want to have a person of color this time because I feel like I will have a much more valuable experience with therapy. So it was a big learning experience for me with my first experience with therapy.
Well, I mean, wow. Like, first of all, thank you so much for sharing such a powerful story, Nafisa. And I'm sure that many folks who are watching this, please let us know if you identify with anything that any of us have said, but especially I'm thinking about what Nafisa just shared, because I think about the fact that, you know, for many of us who enter these situations already apprehensive and very nervous, right? Imagine, and maybe we don't think, as Nafisa said, she was turned off, but didn't really take the time to interrogate why, right? She just knows that she no longer goes at this moment. But let's think about how many of our brothers and sisters will actually just give up on therapy or counseling because that connection isn't there or something is missing. They can't quite put their finger on it, but they know that they're not walking away feeling like that session just served them, right? And so that's why I'm really glad that we're having this conversation. I'm glad, Nafisa, that you shared that insight into your reflection around your previous experience. Thank you so much. Chantel, did you have anything you wanted to add or no?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I am seeing a African-American therapist, Black male therapist. And I remember when I first started, I went in with this preconceived notion, right? I went in like, I'm going to tell them this and I'm not going to tell them that. And I'm just going to keep my business here, there. And this is the only information I'm going to share. And literally, like, he saw through all of that. Right. Like he broke me right on down. And the thing that really I enjoyed about therapy was the fact that he affirmed every feeling and every emotion that I had, right? I didn't feel crazy. I didn't feel, you know, he really normalized every feeling and every emotion that I had. And then he also challenged me to put the mirror back on me, right? And so I'm thinking I'm going in there.
Oh,
We lost Chantel. She'll probably be back in a moment. But what I love about Chantel, you're back.
Okay. Oh, I apologize.
No worries. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. What I appreciated about that was that he challenged me to see me.
Yeah, yeah. And that's exactly what I was just going to chime in and say when I thought we lost you. Was that, you know, I think that what's important is that when we walk out of a therapist's office, is that we walk away feeling like we've gained something, right? Whether we've gained a new perspective, not just on our situations, but even on ourselves in the way and challenge the way that we've been thinking. That's how we grow, right? So I just wanted to share that tidbit from my perspective in counseling. So I want to shift this conversation just a little bit. And I want to talk because this theme has been coming up, Carrie. I don't know if you've seen in the group, but I know we talked about like this silent suffering, right? Mm-hmm. Like all these secrets and what's on the table, what's off. You know, what I've noticed, I don't know what I want to call it, but it's almost like a filter. Like there are some things that you hear people, I think nowadays, starting to talk more and more about, things that seem to be like on the table, and then things that you don't really hear people talking about. So ladies, I'm just actually opening up to anyone who wishes to kind of chime in first. But what do you feel like, you feel more comfortable sharing versus things that you have to hide or require a greater deal of trust to share? I guess I'll share really quickly. From me, now I'm becoming more comfortable sharing that, I deal with anxiety. And at the same time, I will admit that I don't share just how much it impacts me with everyone, right? Am I proud of that? Not necessarily, because I do think that maybe me sharing would open up a door for someone else. Like if you only knew the way, I could say, yeah, I deal with anxiety. Yeah, I was anxious and, I talk with someone, but you have no idea, the many, many ways in which it actually impacts me. Parts of that I actually still do hide. So anyone else wish to share?
I'll share. Just being a therapist, people have an expectation that you must have this perfect life because you know how to solve all these problems, right? So I tend to hide that as well, that I also have anxiety and depression, and I also see a Black male therapist. They must be getting all the coins.
Okay, Black man.
Yes. And so people are often shocked, like, what do you need to see a therapist for? And it's just like, well, being a therapist, you take in a lot of hard things. So it would be, crazy to think that that doesn't go anywhere. So I think that definitely opening up about just mental health in general is not something that is still really talked about in a real serious way.
Yeah. I feel like there's so many things that I keep to myself that I feel like there's like a list of things that I probably, it's more on the silent side than I do let out. So I can't even think of one. I would say for me, and maybe it's because I still trying to figure out like what exactly is like at the root of the issue. For me, it's like relationship is still something that I don't really, I like surface talk about it, but I don't think I really go into details. Like a lot of people don't know when it comes to relationships and how I feel about it, like how I deal with it, and when it doesn't work, how that affects me, how it really, affects me is something I'm still kind of really surface about it. I'll keep it when it's good, it's good. And there goes that saying again. When it works, it works. When it's working, everybody know about it. When it ain't working, it's like you don't hear nothing.
I would say my two things is I can be an extremely overthinker. I can overthink and over just to the point where it's just sickening sometimes. So I really have to pull myself back and just learn to be present and like live in the moment and not be and over worry. So over worry, over analyze, overthink. And I think like you, Edwina, when things are great, they're great. But when they're not, I'm silent and I'm quiet. And I don't know why, but I'm learning to be more vocal about that and saying, hey, things aren't so great in my life. Stuff sucks right now. And there's a freedom that's starting to come along with that, because I think we suffer from that imposter syndrome, where it's kind of like everything has to be presented a certain way and look a certain way. And, the reality is that we all go through things, and so just learning to be more transparent and honest about the good and the bad,
Yeah.
So definitely.
Thank you.
For me, definitely just thinking about, I'm like a extreme over worrier. Like it's awful. Like it's constant. For me all the time. I'm thinking like the worst possible things, like and actually it's something, it's part of my anxiety. And I just one time, my husband was going out of town and I had called Tony. I was just like, I can't, I was just thinking like all the most horrific things you could think of. I was thinking and I had a lot of anxiety and, I was almost in tears and, Tony kind of talked me through it. And one thing that I used to say like cancel, to tell myself to just stop thinking that. But Tony was like, why don't you acknowledge those feelings and kind of talk like yourself through it? And like, I don't know if I mentioned that to her, but that's been so helpful for me. And that's not something that I am willing to be as vulnerable about and share to everyone, that, it's a constant thing that I struggle with every single day. Like right now, my daughter's outside, I'm thinking stuff, it's literally constant. So it's something that I'm constantly like dealing with and trying to find coping mechanisms to work myself through it so that I can function, in my daily life. So I know that's something that I haven't been so vulnerable to share, but I do want to get to help with for sure. And I think it's PTSD, honestly. Like I told Tony, from losing my mom at such a young age, I think that I'm just always so worried about people I really love and care about. It's like something going to happen to them too. It's not something I ever really dealt with. And I know that's something that I need to definitely address in therapy.
Wow. I mean, yeah. Thank you so much thank you, ladies, everyone, for sharing. And when I think about, I find I see definitely mirrors in each of your stories. And Nafisa, as I shared with you before, I think that for me, when I used to do that, right, it actually exacerbated my symptoms, right? It made it worse. But when I think about why I was doing it, I think it's because I thought I had to do it, right? There was this expectation that, especially as a Black woman, girl, you better get that craziness out of your head. You better just go on and push on with your day and do what you have to do. And so I was telling myself that it was unreasonable, the things that I was thinking. And listen, yes, many of the things that I was thinking, very illogical, very unreasonable. But by just trying to push it out the door, that thing came busting back through the door like, here I am. So rather than maybe letting it in and saying, yes, I'm thinking this, but what are the odds of that? You know what I mean? And so taking the time to actually process it, I think actually creates new pathways in my brain. So that next time as the thought is coming in, I'm processing it like the way I did it last time. Yes, I know you're thinking this, but it is unreasonable. That's not really going to happen. Moving on, rather than, bad. There's a difference in shutting the door rather than letting it in for a moment and then pushing it out. I'm no therapist, but I see Carrie's head shaking, so I'm guessing that Apprentice Tony over here is some good stuff. And I'm glad that you found it helpful for you. So I want to wrap up this episode just with some really some final thoughts. And we've sort of alluded to some of this, but I'm thinking that many of our viewers, many of our audience members can probably relate to the things that we not only have already shared, but what we're about to share. And if so, please let us know in the comments if any of these resonate with you. So ladies, final thoughts. How do we show without even telling, right? So let's think of like all of the things that we deal with, whether we're dealing with anxiety, we're dealing with depression. What does that usually look like for you? I'll share really very quickly that for me, I'm sorry, Carrie, but really quickly for me, it sometimes looks like me going MIA. So I know there's some of my friends who, look, y'all better stop ganging up on me now. They're like, yeah, Tony, you will go missing. And I will, so I'm the type, I'm not like a misery loves company type of person. So when I am like really feeling the most overwhelmed is when I fall back from people that I care about. It's kind of like cutting off the bad limbs so you can grow some new ones. But y'all not the bad ones, y'all the good ones, but I'm gonna keep the infection. You know what I mean? Okay. My little analogies, but all seriousness, that's the way that it looks like for me. Kind of going inside myself and shutting the world out. What about you, Carrie?
So for me, it's a combination. So I will either be really withdrawn or really social for no reason. So it's kind of like when you think about like Robin Williams and like how he always made people laugh and all of that, but then he commits suicide. Not that I'm suicidal, but I use that to say that there are a lot of people that are always the jokesters, the life of the party, on all of that. And it's energy expounded to try to convince yourself that things aren't as bad as how you're feeling inside. But it's also a way to keep other people at bay so that they don't inquire about what's wrong with you. And so if you can put on that face and put on the mask, then people don't get in your business. And, so it's either that or I don't feel like the mask. And so I just shut people off.
That part. Wow. Please let us know again in the comments if anything that we're sharing really resonates with you. How about you, Nafisa? How does this show up for you when you are like in need of some TLC?
For me, definitely my patience just gets really, really short, and it affects the people closest to me. I'll be moody. I may, snap when I normally wouldn't. So definitely when I'm feeling overwhelmed, my patience gets very, 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 very thin and affects my mood. For sure. She'll call me like sis.
Okay. In the hobby, like, girl, what's going on?
What is wrong? Yes.
What's up? What's really up? But honestly, it's all up. That's how we're talking about this. Folks who are tuning in, that's exactly why we're sharing this, because a lot of times what you see on the outside may not be what's actually going on in the inside. And that's why we have to stay connected and really be in tune with our friends and our loved ones, so that, like, if Nafisa's popping off, I'm not taking that, to heart. Like, she may get on my nerves, but I'm like, let me call my sis up, because this ain't even about me. Something's going on with her, right? So that's why we're sharing. So thank you so much, Nafisa. Edwina, what about you? How does this show up for you?
I think you and Carrie are very similar to me. I also go through the withdrawal. I go into myself. I keep everyone. I shut the whole world out. I will go into do not disturb mode. That's really what it is. Like my phone, literally, I just stop talking to people. I stop posting online. So if you don't see a post from me for months on Facebook, something ain't right. Like she's probably going through one of her situation again. So I just shut it down.
Yeah, you will. Girl, I'll snatch you up out of it. But that's what we do. We got to snatch each other up out of it, right? Chantal, last but not least, how does it show up for you?
I'm a little bit opposite, where I get extremely stubborn, and I feel like I got to do more. I got to take on more. Give me more, right? And that superwoman complex, right? Because I don't want anybody to see me tired. I don't want anybody to see me falling apart. I don't want anyone to know that I am just going through it. And I'm so thankful that I have my friends and my girls and my people around me to say, no, stop. And I have even gotten to that place in my own life where I say, no, stop. You're going to take this vacation. You're going to take this nap. And learning to be gracious and kind to myself above all else. So yeah, that's how it shows up for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Chantal. I really appreciate, what you shared around, just pressing that reset button, right? Knowing when you need that time to stop. So I'm glad that that's where you are, I know that I am definitely trying to get there. There are moments in which I'm on top of that. And then there are moments in which I'm a whole work in progress, honey. But thank you so much for sharing. And again, those of you who are watching, please let us know in the comments, what does it look like for you? How does that show up when you are in need of just like a mental break, some TLC, some support? How does that usually look for you? And I'm hoping that for those of us that are watching, you're thinking about maybe ways that you've seen this show up in your family, your friends, your loved ones, right? And so maybe we can start to think about ways to support each other through it. So thank you so much, each of you for joining this conversation. As always, Carrie, thank you so much for being
No problem.
It's always a pleasure when we get a chance to speak with you and hear your wisdom. We really appreciate it. And it's definitely a whole bag of gifts when you show up, right, and drop those gems. So thank you again. Much love to you.
Thank you.
For those of you out there, thank you so much for joining in and tuning in to another episode of BGSO. We have a surprise for next week's episode. Those of you who are in the group, you will be in on the surprise much, much sooner. But I think you'll like it. And as always, please like, comment, share, subscribe on YouTube. And Carrie, before we go, could you please let everyone know where they can find you?
So if you search me on psychologytoday.com, then you will find all the information for my practice.
Thank you so much. All right,
Mhm.
everyone, have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. And this time next week, Edwina and I think we're going to have a tan, right? Oh, okay. All right, have a good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.